All right, here we're going to be looking at different types of graphs, analyzing them and sketching them based on a scenario or a situation. Okay, so, but there aren't going to be any numbers involved. So we're just looking at the picture and really looking at the trend of what it's doing in relationship to the problem that they're talking about. So we are on, let's see, page 137 of your workbook and section 6.5. So activity 1, we're just going to look at interpreting a graph. So part A says, how is this graph different from other graphs you have studied? Well, if you look at this graph over here, you notice it goes all different directions. It's straight for a while, then increases, then is straight, then decreases. All of the lines we've been dealing with so far have just been linear. They've been a straight line. So how it's different than the ones we've been used to is we're going to say this graph stays straight, increases, and decreases. Ones before have been linear. Now, part B says, write a short paragraph that describes how the water level changes over time. So we're basically going to be explaining this graph. So, the water level, it starts out by a straight line. So it remains the same. Then the graph goes up. So then it increases. So it may have rained, okay? Then it remained the same again. And finally, it decreased. Okay, so it basically just described the pattern in the line that happened. Now, C says, what situation can this graph represent? So I kind of just alluded to that, maybe with rainwater. Okay, and let's say we're looking at a lake. Okay, so a lake's water level remains constant. Then when it rains, because that is what would cause the water level to increase. So when it rains, the level increases. When it stops raining, the level or the water level remains constant until it decreases back to where it was. So I know that's a lot of writing, but we explained there's basically 4 sections to this graph. The straight line, the increase, the straight again, and then the decrease. So we just explained each section of that. Now, looking down at activity 2. Now, coming down to activity 2, we're going to be matching a situation to a graph. So it says you're riding a bike. Match each situation with the appropriate graph and then explain. So we have 4 graphs and then 4 explanations. Okay, so I'm going to read the explanation. I'm going to start with the explanation and then just figure out which graph it goes with. So A, you gradually increase your speed. So we're looking for a graph that's going up. I'm going to kind of sketch this off over to a side. You gradually increase your speed. Then you ride at a constant speed along a bike path. So because it's constant, we're going to be going straight. You then slow down until you reach your friend's house. So you start to slow down over time. Okay, so I'm just looking for a graph that looks exactly like that, and that's going to be right here, graph C. Okay, B, you gradually increase your speed, then you go down a hill. You then quickly come to a stop at an intersection. So if you think about this scenario, you gradually increase your speed, but as soon as you start going down a hill, you pick up speed. So it's going to kind of get even steeper. And then you quickly come to a stop. So you would be decreasing your speed until you stop. So if we look back, looking for a graph that looks like the green one, and that's going to be graph A. So your answer for B is going to be graph A. So we have B and D left. Okay, part C says you gradually increase your speed, and then you stop at a convenience store for a couple of minutes, so you gradually increase, and then to stop, you're going to have to slow down. Stop at a convenience store, so your speed is nothing. And then you continue to ride, gradually increasing your speed. Okay, and I can tell right here, this is graph D. Okay, so the only one that's left is going to be graph B, so let's make sure this is going to work. You ride at a constant speed, then you go up a hill. So you know when you go up a hill, your speed slows down a little bit. Once on the top of the hill, you gradually increase your speed. So let's look at graph B. You ride at a constant rate, then as you go up the hill, your speed actually slows down, and then you pick it back up again. So that does match with graph B. And I'll do my sketch over here. Okay. Now looking at activity 3, comparing graphs. So it says the graphs represent the heights of a rocket and a weather balloon after they are launched. So A says, how are they similar and how are they different? So if I look at both graphs for how they're similar, I notice that they're both going up. They are both increasing, we could say. And how are they different? Graph A is nonlinear because it's not a straight line. Graph B is linear. So if we're going to compare the steepness of the graph, graph A, if you notice, it's not very steep to begin with, and then it gets really steep as it goes on. So it's not really steep to begin with. Then gets steeper as the graph goes on. Graph B this one has the same steepness throughout. Okay, it's constant. Now C says, which graph do you think represents the height of a rocket? So if you think about the height of a rocket, when it takes off, it starts off really slow and kind of picks up speed as it goes. So that's going to be graph A. We'll say because it picks up speed as it goes. Okay, now activity 4, we're going to be doing very similar type thing but with 2 different graphs. So on activity 4, these graphs represent the speeds of two cars. One is approaching a stop sign. The other one is approaching a yield sign. So A says, how are they similar and how are they different again? So again, with these, they're going to be similar because they are both decreasing in speed over time. So both cars are slowing down. And then how they're different is A, graph A, this one, slows down quickly but never stops, because then it levels out and they kind of keep going again. Graph B slows down at a constant rate. Okay, now on B, compare the steepness of a graph, of each graph. So on A, for the steepness, we have a sharp decrease in speed, then levels off. For B, they slow down to a stop, because that's where the graph would meet down here, because their speed would be 0, at a constant rate. And then C says, which graph do you think represents the car approaching a stop sign? Well, if you notice on graph A, they slow down, but their speed never approaches 0, so that's the yield. Graph B slows down and eventually their speed gets to 0. So we'll say graph B because the speed gets to 0. So this video we looked at analyzing different types of graphs. And so your assignment, if you flip over to the next page, which is 140, you're going to complete the 6.5 practice on page 140.